Society is meant to help to do. That is the purpose of society. Not that society's got some separate agenda. Society consists of its members, human beings and other beings also. So the purpose of society is to facilitate.
Yeah, shy emotions are small. It's not Shetland.
So the purpose of society is to help us to enhance our being, knowing, and loving in harmony with natural laws. That means that somebody's got to have knowledge of the natural laws. So we have the Vedic wisdom is accessible to us. I mean, I and other of our my learned colleagues here, Professor Schweig, we have had access to this Vedic wisdom, and it's explaining how we can enhance our being, knowing, and loving in relationship with the divine. Modern society is not doing that. It's actually extinguishing being, knowing, and loving on all levels. It's bringing the level of consciousness down so that people can't take initiative. They can't express themselves. They can't realize themselves. So what we see in society is two kinds of ignorance. One kind of ignorance is people in general are not aware of natural laws. They're not aware of their spiritual nature. They're not aware of the meaning and purpose of life. They just don't know about it. Why? Because the education system has failed us. Our scientists have failed us. Our philosophers have failed us. The whole machine for generating knowledge and understanding and insight has failed us. That's one kind of ignorance, just not knowing what's going on. And then the other kind of ignorance is that the thought leaders and controllers, they're ignoring the obvious spiritual nature of life. So we've got, actually what we're looking at is two kinds of addiction. On the one hand, we've got addiction to control, addiction to avoidance. This is amongst the leaders. And on the other hand, we've got people in general, addiction to enjoyment and addiction to approval of the leaders. So like people are being herded like sheep. And many people are pointing out, especially in the present situation with the epidemic, COVID, that people are acting like sheep. There are many things to question, and people are not questioning, or they're not even allowed to question. There's such a clampdown on information, such a clampdown on initiative, disagreement with the present system. So we've got I'll maintain that the big problem in modern society is addiction, these two kinds of addiction. How do you get out of addiction? So one of the most effective cures for addiction is a 12-step process, which is actually developed originally for alcoholism, but it's been adapted for all kinds of addiction. And the basis of the 12-step process is turning to our higher power. In other words, understanding that the underlying problem with addiction is lack of spirituality, being separated from oneself and being separated from the spiritual basis of everything, spiritual matrix. So, and the 12-step process, for example, advises and enables us to actually turn to our higher power or appeal to the divine, the source of divine existence, the source of divine knowledge, the source of divine happiness. So this is the solution, actually. If the problem is ignorance, then the solution is knowledge and wisdom. Society has got four main processes. You've got education, you've got governance, you've got resource development, and you've got support work. And the main process there is education. So the solution must be education to help people to understand what is the actual situation. What is the nature of life? What is the meaning and purpose of life? How can we realize the spiritual meaning and purpose of life in our present material context? Because we're not, I mean, we are the Vedic wisdom tells us, and common sense tells us, we're actually spiritual beings having a material experience rather than material beings having a quirky spiritual experience from time to time. No, we're spiritual beings, but how do we act within this material world? Vedic wisdom gives us a rundown on that, outline that how we can develop ourselves, how we can be clear about the existence of spirit, function of spirit, how we can become both spiritually and materially realized in our present situation. And then once becoming effective, adequate individuals, how we can work together to make a thoroughly effective society. So we need an initiative for spiritual knowledge, spiritual understanding, and practical guidance. Now, it looks as though that initiative is not going to come from the material scientists. It's not going to come from the material philosophers. It's not going to come from the present array of political leaders. They seem to be opposed to this. Material scientists are dead against this. And it will be most inconvenient for political leaders who appear, it seems as though they want to keep everybody in submission for whatever their reason. It'll be inconvenient for them to introduce this into their agenda. So it's going to take an independent initiative on the part of those who have knowledge, have wisdom, and I would say have the compassion, practical compassion, how to, the determination to somehow or other start spreading this knowledge. Now, the initiative can come on two levels. My spiritual master said that in the future, fairly near future, it seems to me, maybe within 10 years. So there will be, or there will have been, something like a spiritual revolution in society. Not a coup by any particular. When I talk about spirit, by the way, I'm not talking about any kind of religious group. I'm not talking about Christianity. I'm not talking about Islam. And I'm also not talking about Hare Krishnas. I'm talking about a spirit wisdom-based spiritual movement, spiritual enlightenment. So he's saying that people in general will have raised the level of their consciousness and they won't accept material leaders. They will accept spiritual guidance or spirit-based guidance. And consequently, he actually said that it won't be possible for politicians to be simply material. So on the one hand, we need a grassroots movement for education and training also. So for example, my Guru Maharaj, our Srila Prabhupada, the first purpose of his movement when he established his movement, ISKCON in 1966. So the first purpose is distributing, propagating principles, spiritual principles and spiritual techniques to correct the imbalance of values and to introduce peace and unity. So that can be a grassroots process because, I mean, the Hare Krishnas or any spiritual movement is not, we're not the only ones. There's so many people in society who are, restless, restive under this material clampdown. But there's a lack of framework, actually. There's a lack of common framework. Understanding, for example, Srimad Bhagavatam, my Guru Maharaj, he said, there's a need for unity. There's a feeling, a need for unity. And what is the actual source of unity? So he said in Srimad Bhagavatam or in Vedanta Sutra, in other words, in the key Vedic literatures, those two key Vedic literatures, Janmadhyasya, turning to the spiritual source and basis of everything and helping people to understand that we're all spirit soul. We're all eternal, potentially knowing and blissful spiritual beings. We're not this material body. So, we're not Iranian, we're not American, we're not Ukrainian, we're not Russian. This is not our fundamental reality. once we realize our common spiritual reality and we realize the common spiritual framework for everything, then we can actually, we'll be able to see how we can come together in peace and unity, how we can actually love each other, how we can actually respect each other and celebrate our cultural differences, celebrate our national cultural differences, celebrate our spiritual cultural differences. Those who are deeply understanding and realizing the essence of Christianity. Christ said, the first commandment is this: love God fully and love your neighbor. And those who are realizing, deeply realizing the essence of Islam, those who are deeply realizing the essence of the Vedic wisdom also, or Buddhism, then we can come together and we can actually respect and love each other. So that's one level, it's a grassroots. And the other is to put forward a systematic program to conscious thought leaders and change makers, not necessarily present political leaders. There may be more conscious political leaders waiting in the wings. Let's hope there are. But in any case, there are many thought leaders and change makers who will welcome a framework, welcome an initiative that helps us to understand the spiritual reality and helps us to understand and realize how we can put this into action. So, I mean, if I wanted to put forward a call to action for ourselves and for our audience, the first thing is we're suffering from learned helplessness. We're giving in too much to things that don't make sense, to a worldview that doesn't make sense, to a social system that doesn't make sense. And we need to take initiative just to do something, make a difference. Every week, do something that's potentially life-changing. Do something that we don't have to do, which is raising the level of our consciousness, raising the level of consciousness of people around us, and raising the level of consciousness of our interactions in the world. And we can do that on different levels. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is to join up. We need to make a network. We need to make begin to join up so that, like, for example, we hear that trees, they appear to be individual above the ground, but below the ground, all the roots are interlocking and they're communicating with each other. So we can also be like that. We can have a network of roots spreading all around the world. And of course, educating ourselves and taking initiative to start this, educating ourselves, educating each other, sharing insights, and establishing, I would say, propaganda. My spiritual master, my first spiritual master, he used this word, propagate. It's not a dirty word. There's so much material propaganda. So we can make spiritual propaganda, meaning that challenge the material assumption, challenge the material system, challenge material science, show that it doesn't make sense, and show what is the positive, loving, alternative. So with that, I'll rest my case. Thank you very much, Jonathan, for inviting me.
You're so welcome. Thank you, Swami. That was really, really beautiful. Thank you so much. And timing, unbelievable, perfect timing. So thoughtful. So we're going to leave some room at the end for some questions. And if you have questions, you can actually write them in the chat. And if you have a specific question for a specific speaker, please maybe note that. So I'm not going to make a summation of what Nemi Swami just said. We're just going to keep moving on. But I just want to say thank you very much. And that was really deep and so important. And just the seeds that you planted in all of us. And there's so much that can grow from that. So thank you. Okay, so the second speaker, really excited to hear from Graham Schweig, PhD, Professor Graham Schweig, PhD. He's from Harvard. He's a from Harvard, got his PhD from Harvard University in comparative religion with a specialization on classical, sacred Sanskrit literature. He is currently a professor of philosophy and religion and director of religion studies at Christopher Newport University in Virginia, and distinguished teaching and research faculty at Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley, California. Dr. Schweig has lectured widely in the US and in Europe, has been invited speaker over 36 times since 2007 at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, DC. Among his many publications, he is perhaps most known for his translation and interpretation of the Bhagavad Gita, entitled Bhagavad Gita, the Beloved Lord's Secret Love Song, published by HarperCollins in 2010. He's currently producing a translation and interpretation of the Yoga Sutra for Yale University Press. So please welcome Dr. Graham Schweig. We're so happy to have you here. Thank you for coming and speaking with us today. And again, as a reminder, we're just basically, if you could cover these topics from your perspective, what is the trouble? How do you personally respond to this trouble? And what do you suggest others can do to counteract the negative influences of this time? Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Jonathan. And thanks to all who are here. Glad to be here. I would like to draw from really, in some sense, you could say the essence of Vedic wisdom, which would be the Bhagavad Gita. Even within the Bhagavad Gita, it declares itself to be the essence of all Vedic teachings. So I'd like to go right to the heart of the Vedic teachings to respond to these questions. It's amazing that a book that is thousands of years old is still so powerfully impactful, potentially, and valuable and precious a piece of literature today. Just as a point of fact, the Bhagavad Gita is the third most read sacred text in the world, after the Bible and the Quran. But there are very stark differences between the Bhagavad Gita and these two other sacred texts. Well, for one thing, the Bible is 31,000 plus verses. So that's a lot of verses. The Quran itself is 6,200 plus some verses, or surahs, as it's called. But the Bhagavad Gita is only 700 verses. Only 700 verses. And these verses are so deep that one can spend a lifetime delving into these 700 verses and become more and more realized as we read them. I'd like to start, though, by stating what the problem is, and really we can point to the Bhagavad Gita as illustrating this problem, because the problem, in one sense, is nothing new. The problem with the world is the human condition. You know, there are different ways to explore what the human condition is about. But the Bhagavad Gita begins with the root condition, which I would describe as most fundamentally how the world suffers from an impoverishment of the heart. Plain and simple. We suffer from a fundamental impoverishment of the heart. Look, we all come into this world expecting love. If you recall, I don't think any of us can really recall what it was like to be an infant fresh out of the womb, but we can observe those who do come out that way, and you can see that the cognitive faculty is not developed at all. The interactive faculty, or the ability to act even with even one's limbs, is not even possible. We come out in this world with a heart that expects love and that gives love. This is so fundamental to human life. And as humans grow within their particular conditions, we find shortfalls. We don't find the fullness of love that somehow all of us expect. Even in the best of rearings, there are always shortfalls. No matter how wealthy one is, no matter how poor one is, the impoverishment of the heart can be found pretty much ubiquitously. So the Gita, the Gita begins in a way that it doesn't sound like a scripture. With the Bible, we begin with these very lofty, terms of cosmic creation. In the beginning, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light, and God made the heavens and the earth. I mean, it's very majestic and powerful and so on. And then even with the New Testament gospel writers, they begin with the 14 generations that lead up to the next 14 generations, would lead up to the next 14 generations, which land on Jesus. And another gospel writer will quote the book of the prophets, one of the books of the prophets, and show some proof that Jesus was predicted to come. And then John will, resort to the language of Gnosticism. The Word was with God, the Word was God, and it's just very majestic. The Gita begins in a very unexpected way for a Western reader. Dharma kshetre, kurukshetre, samaveta yoyotsavaha. The blind evil king asks his minister, on the field of Dharma, on the field of Kuru, gathering together, samaveta yoyotsavaha, in conflict, how did they act, O Sanjaya? How did they act? So the Bhagavad Gita begins with this fundamental challenge that all of us have in the human condition, which is our outer conditioned nature by our various circumstances, discussed as or presented in the second few words of this first verse of the Gita. Kurukshetre, on the field of our conditioned nature. How do we, deal with that outer conditioned nature in relation to dharmic kshetre, on the field of our true inner nature? This is the rub. This is the rub. The Gita wastes no time in confronting us with this challenge. How do we deal with the outer conditioned nature, which is different for everybody? And yet the true inner nature is the same for everyone. So how, not that we are all the same or identical with one another, no, but we are made of the same eternal substance, according to the Gita. So this is the challenge. How do we bring these two together, which are naturally conflictual? How do we bring these into harmony with one another? So this is yoga. This is what the Gita teaches us, that is yoga, the union, the harmonious union between our outer conditioned nature with our inner true nature. The setting of the Bhagavad Gita is so unexpected. Of course, many of you know already that when you read the first chapter of the Gita, you are in effect stepping into a story that has already begun, because the Gita is plucked out of or extricated from the greater Mahabharata text in which it was originally situated. In fact, the Mahabharata is longer than all of the three sacred texts of the world put together, far longer, of 100,000 verses. So the Gita is this precious little jewel of 700 verses, which have so much to say. And the first thing you learn in the Gita, the tacit but most powerful teaching is there will always be problems in this world. In fact, this world is so beautifully designed to have problems popping up one way or another. First beginning with our bodies and our minds and our hearts. These are challenges right there in our own field or sphere of immediate interaction with ourselves. What to speak of with others, what to speak of the greater culture or nations and other cultures and so on. It just extends out further and further. How do we deal with a world that's filled with conflict, pain, and suffering? Kim Makurvata Sanjaya. This is the question that the Gita challenges us with right at the start in the first verse. So these verses are packed. And I can barely get beyond the first verse, honestly. After reading the Gita now for 57 years, it's hard enough for me to get even beyond the first verse. But of course, I translated the whole Gita, so I had to. But in any case, the challenge is there. And the reader witnesses Arjuna as he is about to engage in a battle. Again, an unlikely scenario for the beginning of a scripture. He's about to engage in a battle that ends up stifling him to the point of rendering him completely hopeless and devastated and depressed. And yet the first chapter is called Arjuna Vashada Yoga, the yoga of Arjuna's despair. So let us not despair. Despair can actually be a yoga. So let us turn the despair that any of us have, turn it around and allow it to lift us up into a state of true happiness that goes beyond the influences of this world. That is not to say that we ignore the painful situation in which we find the world. The Gita does not say that. It does not suggest this, that we just transcend and forget about all that stuff. Not at all. The Gita wants us and challenges us to go within. The powerful and tacit teaching of the Gita, as I said, is that there will always be conflicts in this world, and irresolvable ones at that. The conflict in which Arjuna found himself was irresolvable. It is never going to be fully solved. Ethical issues are always in conflict. For example, pro-choice, pro-life. There are good arguments on both sides. There are bad arguments on both sides. There's never a perfect ethical situation in the world. Why is it that way? Why are things designed that way? The Gita teaches us so we move within. We find the answers within. Krishna says to Arjuna, fight with the sword of knowledge. Become aware of the world situation realistically. Become sensitive to the pain that others are going through. Even as privileged as we may be in our own lives, we can't ignore the pain and the suffering others are going through if we are truly conscious persons. So the Gita teaches this and far more, but the Gita, the whole point is that the outer world situation, which is always conflictual, moves us ever inward and pursuing this kind of cognitive awareness, but ultimately to move us into the innermost realm of the heart. Again, we come into this world with an open heart, and we become disappointed throughout our lives. We also become nourished throughout our lives. So it's back and forth. It's always mixed. So the Gita is claiming that if we move inside, and if we have a teacher, if we're fortunate enough to have a teacher like Krishna. Now, Arjuna was pretty lucky. He had the best yoga teacher ever, okay? So, but we can also have Krishna as a teacher by reading their conversation over and over and over. This is the way to go inside. This is where the sort of knowledge is to be found. Gandhi's very well known for saying, if you want to change the world, change yourself. Okay, so this is very much in the spirit of Vedic civilization. You, to the extent that you are struggling inside yourself, it will be to that extent that you will be ineffectual in changing anything outside yourself. This is a powerful teaching of the Gita that Gandhi read from every day, the Gita that Henry David Thoreau, one of the transcendentalist philosophers, living up where Jonathan lives, read every day from the Gita. Because the way we change the world is by changing ourselves, by transforming ourselves, by growing a fullness of heart within ourselves. The first chapter of the Gita demonstrates how Arjuna ends up by the end of the first chapter with a shattered heart. The phrase is a shattered heart. So we must learn how to find the source of love within our hearts and grow that so it can brim over into the outer world. And this is how we solve the problems. How that translates for each one of us will be very individual, will be very particular, and no one can give you a formula for this. It's what you find inside of you and then what you bring out. So it is the solutions are found within the heart, because the outer world will always come back with more challenges. Whatever solutions you come up with, there's another challenge. And this is nothing new, folks. We feel, a lot of our world situation now, especially with the physical distancing. I know we call it social distancing, but it doesn't have to be social distancing. It probably needs to be physical distancing because we're dealing with physical little molecules, the little slimy molecules called COVID-19. But don't let the slimy molecules become part of your consciousness. COVID has nothing to do with the life of the heart. And this is where the Gita says we need to focus. There are secrets to be known from the Gita. And I'll just end with this. There are secrets. If you read through the Gita, you will come to know these three secrets, what Krishna calls the great secret, the greater secret, and the greatest secret of all. Sarvaguyatamam bhuya shrinu me paramang vachaha. Me paramang vachaha, my supreme message. And in those secrets are the solutions to all of our problems. So I'll just stop there, and we can always continue more of this later.
Well, we're definitely going to have you back to tell us more about those secrets.
Well, it's in there. It's right in there. So yeah, it's right in the Gita.
Thank you so much. That was really, really extraordinary. And just the thought of the Dharma of despair and how we have to have our hearts cracked open.
Yeah, the yoga.
Yes, the yoga of despair.
The yoga of despair, not the Dharma. No, we don't want the Dharma.
Yoga. Yes,
we want the yoga of despair. That's right.
Yes. Thank you. That was amazing. So again, if you have questions for Dr. Schweig at the end, let us know, and you can write some of your in the chat. We'll leave some time. So we're going to move on. Thank you so much to our next speaker, who is Rinaldo Quadros Anaya, also known as Sri Ranga Puri Das. He started his career with studies in science, co-founder of the Biosphera Dharma Foundation, as well as the Amauta Project and the Eco Pueblos Initiative. Attracted to Vedic Vaishnav wisdom and practices, lived several years in ashrams as a monk. He obtained Bhakti Shastri and Bhakti Vaibhav degrees from the Vedic University of Florida. He has a degree in political science and has a PhD in social and cultural anthropology by the Free University of Brussels. He is a former ambassador of Bolivia to the Organization of American States, OAS, in Washington, D.C., being advisor on the international relations and environment policies. He translated the Spanish version of the 5th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Light on the Bhagavat, and some small books by Srila Prabhupada, and also Valmiki's Ramayana into Spanish, along with several research papers on Vedic wisdom. So please welcome Rinaldo, and so happy to have you here. Thank you so much, and take it away. Oh, we have to unmute you. There you go. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Dandavat pranams to all of you. Thank you so much for honoring me, sharing with such wise devotees my little experience. What I would like to say is that what was said is actually the essence, so it will be hard for me to say anything better. Nevertheless, as I was invited to say something about a timeless solution to a timeless problem, what I would like to say is that I see that we're not starting in early life to see the problem. Our childhood and youth has been stolen by evil, I would say, because propaganda has taken over the media, and schools are actually factories for being very foolish, I would say, because they are selling the same things that we're almost opposed to. The Vedic wisdom is saying, Komara Acharet Pragyo, that the early life is the moment where you want to know what's going on. And you're fresh to get the knowledge you need. And you're fresh to get the answers you're looking for. That's why business is not a problem. But when business is sense gratification, childhood is being deprived of the possibility to wonder what's life. They're already too spoiled too early to ask prominent questions. So they are forced to be foolish. And you can see that. It's very easy to see how foolish our children nowadays. They don't take risks in life. They want everything granted. That's part of the publicity. So Vedic wisdom is telling us that we have to be early to give advice, be early to act, and we don't have to be just curious to see how childhood and youth is being stolen by evil. And it's not something taken out of context. Actually, so strong is publicity nowadays and media that they are drawing the agenda for the lives of people. Vedic wisdom, since Lord Brahma, in the first place, starts with austerity, simple life, get yourself together. And children now have become the new customers. So they want them to actually go into sense gratification as early as possible, to draw their foolish parents also in the same stream. So what we're facing today is a very difficult time, because the proportion of action that we take is very small compared to the portion of influence that materialistic people has taken. They have stolen universities. They are teaching nonsense to the supposedly most intelligent people in this planet. If we see in Vedic light, what we learn in university is very, very foolish. Absolutely. Because we're just being very fine on the surface and very void in the depth. So more and more we have very sophisticated ways to say foolish things and to make them seem amazing. So I would say that if we don't, and this should come to the end, but this call for action is so strong for us, coming from the Supreme himself. He is actually begging us to make sense in our lives. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, of course, is our supreme leader. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is telling us, don't slip back. Sono Nityananda, sono Harida, Sarvatra Achar Amar Korho Prakash, Prati Gare Gare Giya Koroibika, Bolo Krishna, Bhajo Krishna Koro Krishna Sikh. So we as servants, as was well said, we are the ones that have to do the propaganda of the Hare Krishna, of course, in every possible way. In whatever capacity we have, whatever influence we can have, starting, of course, with ourselves, but going quickly to the children, quickly to the youth, because as one gets older, becomes more afraid. So, of course, it's very important to reach the intellectuals, to reach, the leaders. But if we are able to reach the youth and the children, they are more daring. They can actually take steps. Most of you have started this spiritual life very early. So Prabhupada had that very clear. So he was going, when he was in India yet, he was trying to have his friends, give me your children, I'll educate them. So he was clear on that. And when he came to the West, immediately, first thing, he went to the youth before they get completely lost. And we can see the ones that were able to meet this Hare Krishna movement early in their lifetimes, they were able to catch it better. They can carry along nicely. So we don't have to be shy. We have to be very daring, actually. And we don't have to see things happen, because this is a fight. we're fighting. There's people that's trying to have a material profit out of the innocence. And so they are very strong, trying to put people into the sense gratification business. And we're in the opposite side. But we don't have the same means. So this is a guerrilla warfare because we don't have the power, the muscle to face them in front with the same capacity. But this is a guerrilla warfare. We have actually to recruit people as much as possible in every field of action. You see what the Vedas are saying, even about our eyes. You know, when our eyes are open to this world, is to be distracted. Even for meditation, it's advised you close your eyes because our eyes are meant to distract ourselves. So the modern world is catching our vision in every possible way. Why? Because inner vision goes against this sense gratification process. So, sorry if I was just too passionate, but early years are the wonder years. Shraddha, that's the beginning of spiritual life, has been defined by the acharyas as the belief that there is some beautiful, sublime reality beyond what we're experiencing now. So this Shraddha is very natural in early years. There must be something more beautiful. There must be something more sublime than what we're experiencing. And then we have to go there at that time, when the time is right, to give that answer. So we have to reach out. We have the stories. We have Prahlad Maharaj in the womb of his mother, he learned. He didn't have chance after, then was sent to the demons school, but he already had this knowledge given. Dhruva Maharaj, 5 years old, but that's the example we're getting. The Shastras are not telling, oh, wait until you get old and then start. No, it's just the opposite. Being old is too late. Being old is for teaching. But we have to reach out. We have to move. We are fighting. There's a deliberate effort to doom society. And we have to be very well aware. So I follow what Nemi Maharaj said. The state of denial is the main problem. And this problem also affects ourselves as devotees. Sometimes we don't believe that we have to be part of the solution, very active part of the solution. So there's no other way to counteract evil but spreading the good and giving the best example we can. There's always something we can do. We can offer prasadam, we can do kirtan, we can go into the media. If we're in politics, we have to do politics. If we're in economy, we have to do Krishna conscious economy. So I think that our Guru Varga is expecting from us to be agents, because actually das means that. That's the difference between Shantaras and Dasyaras. Shanta is very passive, you know, you're just admiring, oh, God is so beautiful, so nice, very good, but you don't do anything on your own. But das means a call for action itself in our name. So our names are changed, or say, okay, you before you were, I don't know, John, whatever. Now you're Krishna Das, my friend. Now, sorry to tell you, you're a slave of the truth. Now move on. So we are being called to action by our gurus. Actually, that's the power of the spiritual master, because we need that energy from the supreme, from different level of action. In the level we are, in this world of ignorance and passion, we don't get this pure goodness. So this has to come from the spiritual world. So again, this Hare Krishna mantra, Golokera Premadhana Harinama Sankirtana. This is not a creation of this world. So what we are intent to do comes from a different world. It's actually from completely overseas. So my humble request for you all is, please be tolerant with this fallen soul. But what I intend through this little time is that we were already given the solution, and this solution is dedicate ourselves, give your everything, give your energy, give your thoughts, your action, everything very actively in society. Later on, when we're 90, 100, okay, we can get back a little bit, relax, and you know, be peaceful. But love and peace don't go along. That's something we have to understand. Peace is one thing. If you want love, forget about peace. And sure, you have experience about that. Love means forget your peace. Now you have to give all your energy, all your thoughts, your comfort, everything to the one you love. So these two things don't go well together. Hippies mistook that. You know, the hippies thought that peace and love go together. Never. Peace is shantaras, is different modality. It's another mode. Love is action, is forget about yourself. Now you're sold out. You don't own yourself anymore. You cannot ask anything. You just have to give, if possible, more than you can. So it's a different path. The path of peace is actually very, you know, I would say innocent way to live. There's no such a thing as peace when you're pursuing love. So thank you so much. I appreciate this opportunity to have heard the wise, and to share with all of you, and I'll be willing to hear, you know, your part next. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Sri Ranga Puri Prabhu, and for your passion and your call to action for everyone to fight for love, fight for truth, and not be inactive. What a nice point about it's not just about peace. And I think everyone's touched on so deeply today, all three of the speakers, about being active, you know, love in action. I think each of our speakers really spoke to that very directly, love in action from very different angles, which is part of why we're doing this, is to bring different voices that are all based in Vedic knowledge. But it's like different spokes of the wheel coming to the center, which is love, which is true love. And how do we find that in ourselves, and how do we bring that into the world, and how do we really, really connect spiritually as human beings? So does anybody have any questions? There is, it's not a huge group, so we could If you go on your camera, and I think there's a little place you can, under reactions, if you go and you raise your hand, click on your hand, then people can directly ask questions. Does anybody like to ask a question, or does anybody have a comment they'd like to briefly make at this time? Let's see. Come on, you guys. Questions, comments? Oh, we have one from Shamarupa. Go for it.
Yeah. Hi.
And who you're addressing. Comments and who you're addressing.
Okay. Well, I think, let me put myself on camera, just be a little personal here. Hi. Dr. Schweig, is it Schweig or Schweig? So you were speaking earlier on Bhagavad Gita, and you were speaking about, the cause of suffering primarily has to do with consciousness, as you were pointing out in Bhagavad Gita. And I was reminded of a conversation or a interview, or I guess you could say conversation, that Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada had with the lieutenant of police in Chicago. Because in Chicago at that time, I think it was the early 70s, was having a major problem with crime, which is a perennial issue with that city. And he was recommending that the city support a Food for Life program in which the disciples of Bhaktivedanta Swami could distribute prasad. And the lieutenant was thinking that he was addressing an issue of poverty, in which Bhaktivedanta Swami said, "Oh, do you think crime is only limited to poor people? It has nothing to do with the lack of food. It has to do with consciousness." And he was working on that level. So in terms of, you were pinpointing really beautifully how the Gita, which is the essence of the Vedas, addresses, and of course the heart of the Gita was addressing the issue of consciousness, as you were saying, to go within. And so I was thinking about your talk about what practical steps and this also may addresses Nemi Maharaj's points also of how to address practically the imbalance of society and what practically we all can do. So maybe you want to, if you could, maybe speak a little bit on that. All right. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. If we go and return to the Gita and what the Gita says, and I was disciplining myself to just look at the text of the Gita, we find that there are different dharmas or swadharmas for different people, ways that we can offer our hearts in the world. That will not be, there's no formulaic answer to this. Some people will find making sanctified foodstuffs available to others. That's an offering of love, because as far as I know, even well-off society, people in upper classes of society, they also eat. I mean, it's not like, they also need to eat, but there's a subtle aspect to food. Of course, it's nutritional nourishment, but there's also the dimension of affection that goes along with offering food. And that's why loved ones get together over dinner, they party over dinner, because it's a time to exchange nourishment of the heart as well as nourishment for the body. But the particular food you were talking about is called prasadam, which is sanctified foodstuffs, which again could be easily a way to help purify society. But again, everyone has to figure out what that is for themselves. There are different dharmas, different callings for each and every one of us. That's my immediate response. Swamiji, did you want to? You were mentioned by the questioner.
What question specifically?
I think the person asking the question was really asking about what are the things that can be done tangibly. I think that's what the idea
Or
was.
practical things he was saying.
Practical things, right?
Yeah. And then Ritu afterwards has a question. Go ahead, Maharaj.
Well, first thing, we have to be clued in, what is consciousness? We have to clearly understand clearly that consciousness is actually covered spirit. And all the, the spiritual texts, they're telling us, they're explaining how we can uncover spirit by connecting with spirit. Like we have a process called Bhakti Yoga. It's actually a universal process. Hearing about the Supreme Personality, the divine, glorifying the divine, remembering the divine, serving the divine. This is a universal process. It's all in all our spiritual traditions. It's not a dogmatic religious process at all. So we have to have theoretical understanding, and we have to have realization as well, and reach out, like compassion, passion, and compassion. Compassion means, like, for example, it's said that Vaishnavas, those who worship the Supreme Personality, there's paradukkha dukkhi. When they see unhappiness in the world, they themselves become unhappy. And people may think that they're enjoying. Like my spiritual master, he went past one time with some disciples, and he went past a golf course. So he was looking out, somehow, I guess he'd never seen people playing golf. What are they doing? He could see these old men pottering around with their golf clubs, and somebody explained they got this little white ball, and they're trying to get the little white ball down the hole. And he started crying. That these people are, they're coming to the ends of their lives, and they're simply wasting their lives. So compassion, helping people to understand the meaning and purpose of life, and presenting that actually in a way that people can relate to. Helping them to, like, meaning of life is the intention, like the meaning of our words is the intention with which we speak them. So the meaning of life is the intention with which we've been manifested or created. And what is that? What is the meaning of life? The meaning of life is relationship. The meaning of life is love. Dr. Schweig has really emphasized that. The meaning of life is love. And the intention is love, that we, just like parents have children, in order to have loving relationships with the children, in order to raise them to become fully competent human beings and set them on the path as well, and continue the whole, family tradition. So the meaning of the Supreme, the divine, and manifesting us is to have loving relationships with us, and for us to have loving relationships back. This is the basis. Love God, love your neighbor. So, and the purpose of life is to live. The purpose of life is to live that meaning actually in our lives, to live in relationship with the divine, in relationship with the Supreme Personality, or whatever the conception of the divine is. Not everybody is ready to think about the Supreme Personality, but anyone can understand that there is a supra-physical basis for everything, and we need to be in touch with natural laws. So understanding, education of ourselves and then others. This is the first means. And actually, my spiritual master, our Srila Prabhupada, he emphasized also the importance of sacred food. He said that actually if we, I mean, when I first tasted prasadam, I mean, my life changed. Sacred food, food that's been offered with love. So when we distribute food that's been offered to the Supreme Lord with love, then actually the whole of society will become spiritualized gradually. And people will actually, our material tendencies, crooked, perverted material tendencies, they'll be straightened out, they'll be removed. So those are some of the practical things.
Beautiful. Thank you. So we have time for a couple more questions. Ritu Kapoor, if you'd like to, let's see, you can unmute yourself. Ritu, thank you. Thank you for coming and joining. Ritu is a yoga teacher locally here. And Ritu, is there any specific person you'd like to address this to?
Actually, I have more like a comment than question. I would like to thank all the speakers. Everything you presented in this short time was really powerful points. And I would love to hear more from all of you, longer conversation or discourses. This past year, I have tried to delve deeper into the Vedic wisdom and been reading Gita. So Dr. Schweig, I absolutely enjoyed your talk. And if you are offering more discourses, I would love to join you for those. So thank you all very much.
Yeah, if anybody, Dr. Schweig or anyone wants to put your link in the tech chat box, you can. And also, Ritu, you can also contact me directly, and I can send links to everyone.
That would be great.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Anyone else has any questions or comments? Michael, Giri, Budara, please. And I will unmute you. There you go.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, first of all, many thanks to all the speakers. It was very informative and thought-provoking evening. I'm really glad that I canceled my other appointment in order to make sure that I could get here. So thank you for that. And yes, I agree with Ritu that would love to hear more of you. Another thought that comes to mind is, is it a good idea to kind of get a little bit more organized on a regular basis and actually go into some of these subjects and look at them more deeply? So thank you again. For those who might be listening on Facebook who are golfers, there is room for you. There is the very well-known book and movie with Will Smith called The Legend of Badger Vance, which is a golfing interpretation of the message in the Bhagavad Gita. So go there. Don't give up hope, whatever you do. and which leads me on to my question, which is, in the way that I'm seeing the world, we're talking about problems in a generic sense. And one of the specific problems I see, which I think really can't lead us to any good place at all, is that our world is becoming more and more polarized. And that means that I have a set of opinions, the way that the algorithms of social media work. I tend to then gravitate automatically or be brought to people that share my opinions. And I deepen in my opinions about the way the world is. And that means then that other people who think differently than me seem foreign and unlikable, perhaps. What do we have that can help bridge that? One of you, I think it was Nemi Maharaj, thank you by the way, Nemi Maharaj, for your talk, talked about unity and diversity. And is there really, how do we go from these very lofty philosophical concepts, real and important as they are, how do we go from that to how do you really make this work? How do you bring people together? How do you validate everyone's unique individual spirituality and yet show that, in our individualism, we do have a connection with each other?
Thank you for that question, and thank you for your presence. Dr. Giri has been a wonderful friend and my mentor for so long, helped me along this path of kind of presenting some ideas, making them more practical. Our spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, in his presentation of Srimad Bhagavatam, he emphasizes that there is a need for unity, but he says there's a pinprick in society at large, and there are quarrels over insignificant issues. And the answer, the solution is to see the common source and basis of everything, Janmadhyasya. But before we can do that, we have to understand ourselves. So one recourse will be to bring, for example, religious, spiritual, and cultural leaders together who are open to the idea that we're actually all spiritual beings, and get them all to express this. And actually, we have to challenge each other, to love each other, to celebrate our differences by seeing our common nature. And that means opening the heart. Instead of celebrating our dogmatic differences, to actually open the heart so that we can see that this person, he enjoys jokes just as I enjoy jokes. He enjoys family, for example, just as I enjoy family, and he's suffering. And as we open our hearts, as we become vulnerable to each other, then actually we'll really feel this common bond, our commonality. We'll feel that. And if leaders can come together in that way, and then spread this message to their, within their sphere of influence, instead of telling their dependents, to hate anybody who's different, bomb them, kill them, hate them. There's so much of that. So that even what passes as religion has come to be a kind of quasi-spiritual politics. Unless and until we can actually become vulnerable to each other, the solution, this problem can't be solved. For example, what's his name? I'm sorry, I've forgotten his name, who introduced or developed the idea of nonviolent communication.
Marshall
Rosenberg.
Marshall Rosenberg.
Mm.
So his process is effective. So he says, first of all, you describe this instead of blowing up at people or just tolerating. His process is effective because you describe the situation, explain your feelings, express your values, and then make a request or a suggestion. So in other words, and he points out that when we do that, when we become vulnerable to each other, then we can actually communicate. Then we can experience and appreciate our commonality. And there is a possibility of genuine heart-to-heart communication. It requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires courage. And we have to assume that actually the human spirit will find a solution, instead of assuming that we're going to remain like critically and terminally different from each other for all eternity. It's not. We have to assume the ultimate good of the human spirit. Anyway, those are some thoughts.
Yeah, that's great, Maharaj. I wonder if I could just ask a small additional question to Dr. Schweig in regard to this, is that, it echoes what he talked about in terms of the child being open-hearted and just like a being of heart. And that's how we really start out in life. and you're talking about vulnerability. You know, what does the Bhagavad Gita say about getting to that place? How do we do that? How do we cultivate that courage that Maharaj is talking about to arrive there?
Yeah, very, very good. I think the Bhagavad Gita teaches the very thing it exemplifies in its presentation, which is dialogue. Without dialogue, we can't really be interpersonally delving more deeply into a place of understanding, and as Maharaj talked about, compassion, and it's the dualities will always be there in this world. The Gita teaches this, right? We all know this. The question is how to engage the duality. If the duality means alienation, moving further apart, more polarization, that's one thing. But dialogue is the antidote to polarization. Dialogue. If you'll notice the people in your life who are, have some tension with you, but if they're willing to engage in dialogue, where there is a give and take, where there's the humility of receptivity and the passion of contribution. This is what bhakti is about. It's not about notice that the Gita is not about preaching. It's about sharing and dialogue. So this is the example we need. And by the way, the Gita is not the only Vedic literature that is demonstrative of dialogue. Many of the Upanishads, the Chandogya Upanishad, the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, there are plenty of examples of dialogue. But how to dialogue, this is what we need to learn and to be sensitive to. It has to do with Shravanam Kirtanam, for those of you who know what those mean.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Two things. One is I keep coming back to the yoga of despair. And I think it's really important also because if we can, if we actually feel our own despair, if we actually get in touch with it, our own suffering, connecting to our own challenges and really feel it, then we'll also be able to be empathic with others, knowing that we have it rather than denying it, pretending it's not there, seeking, like Ranga Puri Prabhu was saying, always going external through the senses, trying to basically avoid our suffering. But if we really go within, one of the first things we might experience is the truth of our despair and the truth of our challenges and our suffering. If we can face that to some degree, then we can also respect the reality that other person sitting right in front of us has the exact same dynamic going on. And then that conversation opens up also. So it's another way of—
Jonathan, I really appreciate what you're saying. I mean, look, Arjuna had a choice when he fell into the state of hopelessness. He could have said, Krishna, I don't really want to talk to you. Would you just leave the battlefield? Just leave me alone. He didn't say that. He did just the opposite. Shishyas teham, shati mam aham prapanam. I am your student. Shishyas te mam shati mam. I submit myself unto you. So on. So in other words, there began the dialogue. The dialogue. It's the essence. We as humans, we don't hear one another enough. I go to these interfaith dialogues quite a bit. I've been going for 20 years now. And at the end, they always say, how did you like it? I said, I loved it and I didn't like it. The part I loved is that just it's so nice to connect with others. What I didn't like is I need people not to just keep scratching my back. The people who need to be there are the people who hate me. I want to talk to the people who hate me. And I want to learn from them. I want to find out from them what needs to be understood. Why do they hate me?
That's so good. That's really good.
That's hard stuff.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you. So we have a couple more questions. If you gentlemen can stand for a few more minutes, if that's okay. And I also just wanted to, Sri Ranga Puri Prabhu, the way he brought out the innocence of children, I think that was already mentioned, and how we're diverting the real natural questions that children have and immediately distracting them. So what a powerful point that was. Brajesh, Dr. Bruce Canvasser had a question or a comment, and then Madhuri had a question or comment, and then Dilip had a question or comment. So we can go a few more minutes. That would be awesome.
First of all, I just wanted to thank everybody. I thought it was very informative and I really enjoyed it. And I think actually Krishna Bhamani had a question here.
Dandavat pranams to everybody. It's been very wonderful listening. Yeah, I had a question, and this is happening right now. You know, Prabhupada, he sacrificed so much for the benefit of all by coming at such a late age and just, you know, sacrificing so much like he did. So now the big debate is with this COVID, just do we act for the benefit of all, or do we think of ourselves? This is something current. I just wondered, everybody's so intelligent. I just wanted to hear a little feedback, you know, from Gita. We're put in this situation. What is the right thing to do? I know Prabhupada did have his vaccines, you know, I don't know if this is appropriate right now, but it's a dilemma. So if anybody has any response to that without getting.
I have a quick response, and if someone else wants to say something. One, I'm not sure getting into pro-vaccine, anti-vaccine is the right place for this forum. But I will say that whatever choice you have, either way, it can be for the good of all. In other words, if you're pro-vax, and if you're doing it for the good of all, that's coming from a good place in your heart. If you're so-called anti-vax, and you may also be thinking this is for the benefit of all, not just for me. So that's a whole nother conversation. And that's why I think we can get into so many things about this and that, the details of, you know, the vaccination, that I think in this particular form might not be a very, you know, the right place for that. But anybody else have anything else you want to say on that is fine with me.
Yeah, Jonathan, I really like what you're saying, because you're saying what the Gita is saying. Right on. It's about the consciousness with which we enter into an activity. What's behind it? What's behind our decision? If I'm doing it and using it as something political, something that is exercising power, you know, over others, then this is not good. When religion is used as a power tool, then this is not good. Merold Westphal wrote a book called God, Guilt, and Death. Doesn't sound, it's not as bad as it sounds, by the way, but he talks about how when religion is used, it's bad. But when religion, or, you know, or take yoga or anything, is valued intrinsically for its own sake and not used, then this is precious. And so you're really speaking to that, Jonathan. It's a beautiful point that you make. Really, if it's done out of the best aspects of ourselves, this is all we can expect.
I'd like to say that whatever we decide, it should be an informed decision. And there's a lot of serious misinformation. For example, in the high street, just out, I mean, I can see from my window, there's huge signs saying, you know, is the COVID vaccine safe? And then underneath it saying, yes, it's been just as rigorously tested as all the other vaccines. Whereas we hear that, at least one of the companies was launching the vaccine within 42 or 60 days of the start, instead of several years. And it's not been produced, it's been produced without animal trials. So it's not true to say this has been as rigorously tested and everything as other vaccines. And there's a lot a lot of very highly informed opinion questioning. So in other words, I'm saying whatever, I don't want to get into, advice, but whatever decision we make, it should be an informed decision. And that's our responsibility. And it takes digging. There's definitely a lot of misinformation. There's definitely a lot of suppression of, for example, suppression on, for example, YouTube and Facebook, suppression of any questioning of the mainstream verdict, go ahead. So it takes digging.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you. Are you guys done? Anything else, Brajesh and Krishna Bhamani? You all set? Okay. Madhuri had a question or comment. And then I think Dilip had a question or comment. Oh, there you go.
Oh, there I am. Oh, I showed up. I'm going to close this. Give me one.
I think we lost her.
Sorry about that.
Oh, there we go.
Now I can't hear. Haribo?
I can
Yep,
hear you.
here.
Haribo?
We can hear you.
Sorry about that. I was making sure I didn't have two systems. So I just had some insights, observations, questions about the whole process. And I put together a little sort of cheat sheet for myself. And if we have a couple of minutes and nobody minds, I just want to go through what came up for me through this discussion and what I found in other interactions in communities and stuff. One thing, Sundar Gopalji, he has written a couple of books, The Dark Night of the Soul and the Book of Dharma, which are both really, really thoughtful and helpful books. Just putting that out there. Second, I spent a lot of time in doing service in Amma's community, and now I'm doing some service in Gurudev's community. And I've had association with a really wide mix of devotees. I've been blessed to know some of you through various bits of association, and I've been blessed to know people who are complete neophytes and people, I work primarily with people who have nothing to do with spiritual community at all. So I just want to put a couple of things out there. We're talking about the world suffering and people suffering. And when you go into that, there is I've been through a wide mix of some material challenges in the last few years. And I will say there's some real solidity to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is that you need to feed people and make sure that they feel supported and loved before they can get to the point where they can have high spiritual recognition. So that's one thing, because so much of what's happening right now is based on that. We have a lot of people going hungry. We have a lot of people feeling unheard. We have a lot of people whose basic needs aren't being met. That is one of the things that all of the Swamis have really put in there. It may not be the top item of their focus because they're working on two levels to provide for a genre of people who are really thirsty for spiritual advancement, but they're generally, many of them are also recognizing of the fact that if people are hungry, they're not going to be able to respond to things like this. So just putting that out there. Another thing is, a few years ago, there was a movie made shortly after the Twin Towers came down in New York City, and it was done by two French documentarians. I think they were twin brothers who managed to survive the Twin Towers. And they did a video called, I believe it was called, or a documentary called In the Name of God. And in this documentary, individuals who were considered top leaders or acharyas of various different spiritual communities were asked to speak about a day in the life of and how they saw the world. And that included the head of the Southern Baptists, the head of the Ashkenazi Jews, the head of the Shinto faith, the head of a Hindu sect, a number, it actually included the Dalai Lama Lama a number of individuals who have large followings. And one of those individuals was Amma, the hugging saint, who I did a certain amount of service for many, many years ago. And one of the things that made Amma distinctive is that every other individual spoke on a global basis. And Amma said she focuses on the individual, because ultimately on the path of bhakti, we all are on an individual path. And one of the interesting sets of circumstances that has come up for me in the last few months is I mix with a number of devotees. I am mixing with the UK Sangha because I've been blessed with the opportunity to get to know some of the individuals, and I get to do seva for the UK Sangha. And I'm also associated with people here, and I've been isolated for a number of years. I didn't have a car, so my association has been far-reaching through Zoom and the phone. And one of the things that's been coming up, and I noticed a certain amount of it come up on this call, is all the talk about what's happening in the world and social conditioning and what is the right way to be. And one of the things, and I may be really off base about this, but where I situate my heart is everything that's occurring around us is the eddying of material energy. And in order to grow to some kind of prominence in my own practice, I have to stay focused on who I am, what my position is, what my bhajan is, how to become individually the most loving soul that I can be. So I'm just noticing that, because when we talk about solutions, we're talking about it's a very small slice that is staying fully conscious on this path. Before I came into Srila Gurudev's association, as I said, I did a lot of service for Amma, and I went to a number of kirtans and associated with people in Nim Karoli Baba's community and in Haidakhan Babaji's community and the Shiva and the Divine Mother communities. And a lot of these individuals have become fairly fundamentalist, but they're not focusing on the aspect of the heart, which is what Srila Gurudev gives us. So I would like to just say everything I'm hearing is so heart opening. And it's also reminding me that I'm very small and I'm very insignificant. And my first duty is to practice as an individual the work to be a loving soul. Now, the other day I was on the Holistic Bhakti call, which has been a really nice program put on through the UK Zoom group. And they're going right down to the root with the younger devotees of how you live in harmony, how you practice meditation in action, which is, from what I understand, the process of not being hasty to react, but recognizing who you are as a soul, who everyone else is as a soul, and how you can give yourself enough time and space and love and self-worth to recognize and have compassion for yourself and the other individuals, which really clears a lot of the challenges that we're talking about. So I agree that we need to start young. I agree that so many things that were said, are so many texts. I also feel that what we're having to do right now is train up a number of individuals to have voices, to speak and to preach. One of the things that I really loved
Jerry,
about
just take one more minute if you would, because we have a couple more people. Thank you.
it won't be even that much. Okay. One of the individuals who spoke out that I really respected was Brajanath Prabhu, who was very clear about bridging the distinction between the Vaishnavas and the individuals who are working to be loving souls and living sattvically, and how that is essential. So the one thing I'd like to throw into the mix here is how we bridge that in a way without being obstructive, being judgmental, being fundamentalist, how we reach for the true nature of ourselves, recognize that in others, and tie that into any kind of program that you guys are looking at, because I think you have the making of a program here.
Thank you so much for your encouragement. That was beautiful. Thank you so much. I'm sorry to rush you. We just have a couple more people.
I told you it was going to take a couple of minutes.
Yeah. Dilip Prabhu, would you like to share something?
Yeah, thank you. I think I'm not really sure what I was going to say. I just felt so inspired to say something. And I've got some thoughts of how to formulate what I want to say. There's not enough time to speak about everything that's in my heart. I wanted to thank the speakers, first of all. It was very inspiring to hear you all speak. And I'm listening really to learn from you, and also to, my vision, my goal is to do something for my Gurudev and for Srila Prabhupada to follow in some way to help their mission. I've been blessed with some talents to work with large groups and businesses and individuals, starting with myself. So I really want to say two things, I think. One is to appreciate this conversation and see where it takes us. And the other is, and again, this doesn't have to be for now, but I'd be interested, as it's the first meeting like this, but what are some of the goals? And if it's to share ideas, that's already amazing. And I would just love to know if there are any other practical or aspirational or visionary goals that you've already thought about. So I'll just stop there because I know we don't have much more time, but the King, I really appreciate the conversation. Love to see how I could contribute in some way.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I'll just say a little something, and if anyone, any other 3 or 4 other people, want to share. This is we've been sort of bubbling underneath the ground for a couple months now, just sort of sharing and getting to know each other. And but all along we've had this intention. There's so many beautiful souls and devotees and yogis and other teachers from other lineages also who have thought deeply about problems of life, the eternal problems of life, and also the problems of our current times. And we wanted to have a strong voice for that. I mean, very few people are even acknowledging, that with so many problems around diversity and so many inequality and inequity, and how many people are actually bringing in the reality that we're all souls, that we're all eternal souls, parts and parcels of God. So this conversation, in one sense, for healing to happen, this information has to come out more and more. And I think it was Swamiji was saying it's a grassroots event because it's not coming from the top right now. And in the ancient Vedic culture, the king was very pious and had the interest of the people in the kingdom very strongly. And he treated the kingdom like his own children. But this is not the case at this time. So it's a grassroots effort, and I think it's organic what we're doing, but I think input from different thinkers and yogis and heartful people will be a great thing. So that was my thinking. I don't know if Maharaj or Ranga Puri Prabhu or Dr. Schweig would like to say anything.
For me, it's been inspired by our Srila Prabhupada, my Guru Maharaj. The first purpose of when he established ISKCON. So I already quoted that first purpose. So he's putting forward spiritual principles, spiritual techniques to correct the imbalance of values and to bring peace and unity. And the Hare Krishna movement is not the only people who are active in this area. So the idea is to put forward Vedic wisdom, which is not a specific spiritual culture. Like the Hare Krishna movement is a very specific spiritual culture, but they're general. So, I mean, there are many spiritually minded scientists with whom we can cooperate. There are many yogis and people on different spiritual paths, people who are engaged in brain research, for example, and also spiritually minded. There's so many people. So we need a worldwide network of very informed, responsible, and influential thought leaders and change leaders who are visionaries and spiritually minded. That's part of the inspiration for myself anyway.
Great. Thank you. Dr. Schweig?
No,
Oh, I thought you were
I'm,
going to say something. Okay.
no,
And-
I'm good. Yeah.
Okay. And Shuranga Puri, Prabhu? You have to unmute yourself.
Besides thanking you all, just a little comment at the end is, for example, ecology now is a big topic in the world. But sometimes people don't understand that you don't respect something that's not sacred. So the sacredness actually makes the behavior of the people. So the only thing you can expect from people is to be respectful to whatever they think is sacred. So in that sense, probably the Vedic wisdom can help us with the concept of Mother Earth, Mother Nature. So because this feeling of sacredness and this empathy can make a difference, just opposite to only counting trees or measuring emissions and things like that are heartless. So that's my suggestion. We can take advantage of the Vedic in the feeling, in the love, as would say Garuda or Nemi Maharaj. Consciousness goes to affection. So that could be like a closing comment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. That was beautiful. So anyone else before we wind it up? I mean, we have, we will discuss with our, with our esteemed gathering of people. We'll discuss and figure out when our next call will be. We will definitely be doing it again. And, we learn from all our experiences. We'll learn from today and get clear on how we want to move forward. But we definitely want to be a voice for good, a voice for healing, a voice for consciousness, a voice for love on the planet, a voice for wisdom and knowledge too. It's very important that we have that. So anyone else? Jayashree, I think you wanted to say something.
Haribol, everyone, Dandavat Pranams. I just wanted to thank you so much, all of you, for speaking so beautifully to some of the most poignant parts of our experience today. And some of the most amazing points I heard had to do with, of course, this being about the heart, this being about sharing the truth.
Oops, we lost the audio.
You went quiet.
Of spirit and devotion of all the innate qualities in beings. Oh, can you still hear me?
We can hear you now.
Can you
Yep.
hear me now?
Yep.
You can hear me? Okay. Just the poignancy of being humans in a world full of so much material exhaustion and pain, and that it's about the heart, how children have the experience, and that it's so important for us to use our energy. Forgive me for not calling each of you Prabhus and Madhuri and KB out, the Dasis, individually, but we are, here on this land right now in New York, and they're building communities that are so much about that. And if it's just like one child or one youth that can use our energy towards this.
You're breaking up a little bit.
This is such a simple. I'm in a bad reception area. I'll say thank you and I'll come again.
Yeah, please come again. Thank you so much. Great to see you.
Thank you.
Look forward to seeing you soon. Okay.
Jonathan?
Yeah.
Just real quick, I know a few people that would be very interested in hearing the recording, and I wonder if you're gonna somehow make it available to us or to the public.
Yes. I will, I think I have everybody's email on the list here, so I could send everybody a recording. I'll do that.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay. So should we wrap it up? Now's good timing. Okay. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks so much,
Okay, we'll
Jonathan.
do it again. And when we
Thank
do
you
it
so
again,
much. That was
please,
wonderful.
thank
Thank
you.
Everyone's coming.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Blessings, blessings.
Thank you,
Thank
Maharaj.
you, Maharaj.
Hare
Wonderful
Krishna.
to be with you.
Thank you, bye. Haribol.
People.
Dhanyavad pranams.
Dhanyavad.
Hey, Jayashree.
Haribol, Shamri. Haribol, Shamri.
Bye bye.
It's so good to see you.
Bye bye, everybody.
Krishna Bhamini. Hare Krishna. Rajesh.
Hey, nice to see you, Courtney.
Haribol.
Thanks for coming.
Haribol. Haribol.
Okay. Haribol. Bye-bye.
Haribol. Haribol.